Hi,
everybody. Welcome back for another fabulous virtual wine tasting with Becker Vineyard. I'm Rebecca Nelson, the wine club director here, and I want to welcome you all to another fabulous Friday wine tasting with us. We are coming toward the end of our first vertical library week, so we were lucky enough to be able to release some wines from our library, which are no longer technically available for sale, and give those to you guys to join us this week. And so we were able to look at three different vintage years of the same wine. And so I hope you've been paying attention or keeping notes, or maybe still drinking some from the first bottle, because we had on Monday, we had our 2016. On Wednesday, we did the 2015, and tonight we're doing the 2014. And all of them have been Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve from the Wilmeth family vineyard. So we hope you've got your 2014 swirling in your glass right now. Tonight we have Dr. Joe Becker with us, and we also, as always, have our winemaker, John Leahy. And I'm going to hang out with you guys tonight as well. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to John and Dr. Joe Becker to get us all started with this fabulous wine tasting. Enjoy. Cheers.
cheers, Rebecca. Thank you for another wonderful introduction. So I guess you're going to hang out with us tonight before you take over the entire broadcast. Joe, I guess we could just sit back and let Rebecca talk, and then we could just drink.
Good idea.
Would you like to lead us out with a couple of words, Joe?
I would. This morning in the New York Times, Eric Asimov, who's the great wine writer for the New York Times, wrote a very nice article. He was talking about village wines in Burgundy, but he wrote something I think that I really spoke to me, and I'm going to read it. He wrote, "Good wine can also inspire thoughtful contemplation and introspection, which perhaps now more than ever is in short supply. And it can lead to caring conversations as well, to listening as well as talking, to shared bonds, to new memories and more humane ways of thinking. I'm not saying good wine is a panacea. It's up to people to find solutions, but wine has the power to bring people together as surely as a great meal." And I just have to say, with everything that's going on, we hope everybody's enjoying spending their just a few moments tasting wine. I think so. My great wine friend Woody has always taught me that wine is best enjoyed when you're with people that you love. So I say cheers and thank you.
Cheers, and wonderful lead-in, Joe. Thank you very much, sir. But I do have to say, when you say my wine friend Woody, I just think of the character off of Toy Story, and I'm like, G.I. Joe's there, buddy. Oh, well, so what I am excited about is we finally get to the 2014. And just real quick, so everybody that's been following with us this week doing the Wilmeth vertical, we started with the 2016 on Monday. Jet was on with us on Wednesday, and we did the 2015. And then now we're doing the 2014. This 2014 for me is very exciting, simply because this was the first year that all three component wines were from the Wilmeth Vineyard. So real quick for everybody, and we'll get to the swirl and taste, but I want to get this up front. This is basically, it's 86% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's 10%, Merlot, and 6% Malbec, all from Jet's vineyard right there in Tokyo. So it really was a demarcation point for me, because this was 2 years into making wine for Becker Vineyards for me. And then, 4 years into it by the time we got it out of barrel to make this blend, and 5 years by the time we got it released. So it's a hell of a commitment in time, but this was really nice. This was a mark for me of being able to do a true single vineyard blend. And I'm very excited about this wine and how well it's held up. So I want everybody to raise their glass, give it a swirl, a sniff, and a taste. Oh my, that is really good. And then, wow. Okay, I think I'm just going to enjoy drinking this tonight. Kind of looking forward to dinner now. But so, Joe, what do you get out of this wine?
So I always think the wines from Jet's Vineyard are so interesting, because when they're younger, you get that very dark fruit, very vibrant, full body on the mid palate. But this wine, I feel like I remember tasting it. You built this, you had the tannins, and what was the percentage of Cab Franc you said?
Oh, there's no Cab Franc in this one.
Cab Franc, okay.
Yeah,
But this one,
86%. Yeah.
okay. This one is, I feel like over time it's rich. It's, it's got that kind of cigar box a little bit that you get in an old Bordeaux on the finish. It's got a little bit of cedar. I think it is a wine that is aged incredibly well.
Yes, it has. It has aged very well. So Rebecca, what do you get when you swirl and taste?
Well, so one of the things that's been great about this week is actually trying those three wines, kind of side by side and seeing the difference. This 14 in particular for me has just such a depth of flavor and such a very lush, rich finish to it that I really, really enjoy. I don't get a lot of fruit on the front. I get more of those sort of forest floor type of flavors with this one. When you're comparing it to say like the 2016 had a lot more of the fruit up front. This one doesn't have that. And I really, really enjoy just kind of the older notes that I get from this one. It's very, very smooth, very, very rich. And yeah, I can just sit back and drink this all evening if you'll let me.
Okay, but I just want to say thank you for that. Yes, I agree with you on a lot of those deeper earthiness. But when you say forest floor, I just thought, your mom is watching. Do not let her know you've been chewing on leaves.
She knows it's morel hunting season up there.
Morel hunting season up there. Exactly.
What's that thing about Irish winemaker in the German hill country?
Okay. Oh no, this is awesome. I'm very excited about those deeper notes. And Joe, it does. When you were talking about, when you mentioned Cab Franc, and I went back, I was like, those piercings are coming out nicely, but they are from bell pepper to more chocolate, more earth tone, leather. There's not as much graphite in this one as there was on Wednesday's, the 2015. That which is really interesting to me, because normally I would associate a graphite or cedar-like scent to a specific vineyard locale. And we talked
John,
about,
I wouldn't tell Jody that you're chewing on graphite.
Yeah, well, that keeps wondering where her drafting pencil leads disappear.
Sorry.
It's a bad habit. But what I really like about this is, as this has been opening up, so I have it, as you know, I decant. So it's decanted for about 45 minutes now. I got a little late start.
Cheers.
And I'm sorry, I keep getting little pieces of cork out of mine. I was in a little hurry. That I'm getting some cherry starting to come out here, as well as some really like dark currant, so like a black currant edge on here.
I think that the dark currant is right on.
Yeah, this is, so again, just to reiterate to everybody who's joining us, I got another question here about that blend. We just talked about it, but it's 84% Cabernet, 10% Merlot, and 6% Malbec. And all of these wines came from Jet and Gay Wilmeth Vineyard there in Tokyo. So the 14, Joe, what are some of your impressions about the year, the vintage 14?
Well, I was trying to remember, John, I was actually going to ask you the same question kind of about, the growing conditions that year. I remember it was definitely, well, I remember we had a kind of an earlier heat wave that year. But
as a matter of fact, it was just about this time. I think it was about the last week of June. And we went into that 4th of July that year with extraordinarily hot temperatures. We had about 10 days with 100 plus. So it really, really hit the stress markers.
Well, and weren't the vines kind of still recovering from all of the damage that they had in 2013?
Yes.
So it was already kind of a stressful growing season for the vines.
Yeah, so when you have some event like 2013, where we had that late freeze at the beginning of May, where we dropped down and we lost, overall the crop load loss was about 80% for us. I think throughout the state it was about 75%. But we lost 80% of our contracted tons that year. What happens is there's the dormant bud and the active bud on the vine in the spring. And for all you viticulturists out there, Trish, I'm specifically talking to you because you know more than I do And if I get this wrong, please correct me. But the active bud is next year's crop. The dormant bud is this year's crop. This year's crop, you can lose up to 3 times. First time you lose it, you get half amount. Second time, a half of that. Third time, you're gone. So it does affect the next year's growth too. It did nip it. And we got about right off the bat with the primary buds in 14, about 50 to 60, maybe 70% of what we were expecting. So it was a lighter load. Now that heat stress did hurt a little bit, but almost everybody was on top of it, especially after 13. And I know Jet, talking to him, he was watering like a madman during those heat spells. And it really shows. The development of this fruit was beautiful, even though we didn't have a lot of it. And I was kind of excited to see the size of the berries. It really developed, matured very nicely.
I think the berries have a lot to do with how Jet drives his pickup truck down the roads. There's just something about that. It's when you go to Tokyo, Texas, it is an experience. There's a green road sign that says Tokyo, and you're there. And there's a couple lots, and then there's Jet's amazing vineyard. I remember the first time I went, I'd had neck surgery about 2 months ahead of time, but Jet decided he told me he only goes about 10 miles per hour down the roads, and he ended up going 100 miles per hour down the road. And when we got finished, I was ready to call my neurosurgeon, but I really feel like that there's something in it's a beautiful vineyard. He's very meticulous about it. And it's also amazing. I always tell people, if you think about the fact that Miss Canada's vineyard's only a few miles away with a completely different taste and aroma on the wines, it's a different experience.
It is. And Jet's actually on here. I know he's watching because I just saw him sign on. That's why I started laughing. I'm like, we were giving him a ration and a half on Wednesday about how fast that man drives. And don't let anybody fool you. I think he has actually figured out how to go faster than the speed of light. So Rebecca, this is a library selection, and I think this would be a good segue for your 35 seconds to talk about the library tasting. No, but seriously, yeah, this is one of our library selections, and we do, and yes, everybody out there in TV land, we are developing a plan for reopening. So you'll keep asking us when. To be honest with you, all of the cosmetic work that we're in the middle of doing, this is the predominant reason we're delaying, is because we have the entire inside of that winery ripped up and we're redoing everything. So it's a little bit bigger project than we thought initially. So with the library tasting, lead us in, tell us a little bit about that, because people can get this again.
Absolutely. So we do the library tastings typically on Saturdays around 1 o'clock, and you come out and you do a behind the scenes tour. And so you'll see, you'll taste out of tank, you'll taste out of barrel, you'll get to see the whole production area. And then you go downstairs into our library, which is what we call our cellar. It's our library of wines. And you go down there and you sit at this fantastic solid mesquite table that was put in for us, and with the mesquite chairs, and it's just amazing down there. And we have 2 different ways that we do it. We'll either do a vertical flight, which is what we've done this week, where we have, the same wine, but from 3 different vintage years, or we'll have 3 different wines from the same vintage year. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because, one, you're going to see the difference in what age does to the flavor of the wine. But the other thing that you can really see when you do that is what the weather, that growing season, did to the wine, because both of those things are going to have an effect. And really the weather has, to me, in my opinion, the larger effect of the 2. And so it's kind of fun to do the one where you've got 3 wines from the same vintage year, because you can kind of see differences just from the varietals, but you'll see kind of the same types of flavor profiles, if that makes sense. And then if you have 3 different vintage years, you can notice the change in color, which I really think is interesting. And with this one, if you hold it up against, a white piece of paper, and you can look out, and one of the things you'll notice is that the color around the edge of the wine, you're not going to be able to see it. You need to do it. Hold your wine up against a white piece of paper. Hold it up and look around the edge of the wine, and you'll see how it's much lighter in color, and it gets darker as you go to the center. And you see more of those sort of orangey brick red color tones to this, and that comes along with the aging. And so getting to see those differences and seeing those wines side by side, and also the fantastic aspect of just getting to do a tasting down in our library is really phenomenal. That's my favorite place on the property. I always tell people.
Let me say something about the library too. The idea behind the library is fairly recent. I always tell that story in good humor about when we made our first 1,500 cases, and my father was admiring it, and my Scotch-Irish mother came over and said, "That's wonderful, Richard, but you need to sell it all." And so for many years, just to make the winery work, we sold everything we could make. We never kept anything back, maybe a little under 10 years or a little over 10 years ago, my dad had the idea that, we'd gotten to a point where maybe we could start holding some of these wines back. And so we've got, wonderful Cabernets and Ravens going back many years, but the library itself was originally our underground cellar. For many years, we could say we were the first winery to make Viognier. We were the first winery in Texas to have an underground cellar. And it was special to me because my brother and I had painted it long ago, but Brett and his father, David, did just a beautiful job redoing beautiful ceiling. You sit at these beautiful mesquite tables that are made from 800-year-old mesquite trees from a company in Comfort that's not around anymore. And I think the other idea too is that we have all of our growers' pictures up along the wall. And I think that fits with what Robert Mondavi told Mom and Dad long ago, which is that when people come to the winery, they want to feel like it's their winery, you're their winemaker. And so when people come down there, we want you to have that experience. We want you to see who's making the wine, who's growing the grapes, what we're thinking, how they're doing over the years. And I think that also speaks to something that we've developed in Texas, that we can have these longitudinal programs, that we can do a longitudinal tasting, and you can start to see difference. And so it's an amazing experience in a really beautiful place.
It really is. My favorite thing though is after we get to go down there, is to actually sit there and talk with people. Like the wow factor is there already, but being able to go through a vertical on there and referencing back, before I forget, Rebecca, so your comment about the meniscus, the oranging and stuff on there. And it is very important to see that, because one of the tells too is as a wine ages, it does oxidize slightly, and you do start to get the variant in there in the garnet down to what you call the brick red, down to the orange tones of brown. So that's a great way to see that. But the thing that I noticed about this when I was being a smart aleck and holding it up, and I went down to look, this is not oxidized at all. So this is still ruby and garnet.
So John, I have a question. I one of the things I feel like you do really well, aside from making great wine, is you make wine that really ages for a long time. Is there anything you think about early on when you're making a wine like this that will build it over long term?
Yes, there are. There are a number of factors in there, and unfortunately, there are other people who make wine listening, and I don't want to share that secret. No. Well, one thing, one of the things that I was taught, oddly enough, a long time ago, not oddly enough, but it's one of those things that you just pick up during a normal conversation with another winemaker, and it's like one of those aha moments, and that's what I meant by oddly enough. And this was an aha moment that I had with winemaker Sarah Gott. And I think a lot of people know her husband, Joel Gott Wines, but Sarah is also under her own right a winemaker and has made some of the Napa's top wines, some of the top Merlots and Cabs. She and I were talking one day. We were making wine for one of her clients at the facility that I was winemaker at. And she was talking about one of her techniques that she likes. After soaking for a few days, she likes to increase the temperature in the tank to about 80 before starting the fermentation. And one of the ways we could do that is with a heat exchange on our glycol system. And so there we had the ability to heat or cool a tank side by side. And so we would do that. And after a couple of years of doing that, it was like this epiphany of, holy moly, you're getting all that extraction up front before it has a chance to oxidize sitting in that tank for a long time. Press it off, get it protected, and suddenly you have a wine. That little tiny change of timing, which is takes the same amount of time as the old school way of doing it. It's just one little change on the front end. Instead of letting the yeast and fermentation slowly bring the temperature up to peak out, you bring that temperature up mechanically first, and then let it peak around and down. Save that oxidation, you save that, and that aging, the ageability goes through the roof. It's a really wonderful thing. Accidentally, we were doing it 150 years ago because we didn't have temperature control. So those grapes would come in warm and start fermentation warm, and then they get pressed off and put away in the cave quickly. So those are, just replicating that in today's day and age when we can chill or we harvest early. We have all these great mechanical advances. We had to rethink what it was that we're making those great moments, the tannin structure, the tannin management in the wine, certainly keeping the phenolics, your terpenes, how to cleave those out, how to get one oxygen bound on the terpene with one sugar off the terpene to bind with the yeast, therefore opening them up. There's a whole host of things we can go into, but that was one trick that I would, just from a conversation with a really great winemaker of, hey, yep, this is what I like to do because I found out this is what happens. And I'm like, oh crap, that makes perfect sense.
Well, because this strikes me. I mean, when I taste this tastes like it's maybe a early 1980s Napa Cab or an older Bordeaux. I mean, it's just so rich and well integrated. I think you've done a nice job with it.
Well, I appreciate that. And we, our whole team there, it takes time to get used to a new winemaker. And in 2014, we were just finding our stride with the team. And it's the same team we've had all along. A bunch of great guys, but my core team members have been there since before I even started. So getting there, getting used to my idiosyncrasies of being very happy and mellow until harvest comes, and then screaming and yelling and throwing coffee cups around and stuff. So it's a wonderful.
That doesn't happen every day during harvest.
Stop, not every day. Just the days.
John, I will never complain. I will never complain because you're the first person I've ever traveled with that has that you take a French press with you. So I can just tell you that the coffee that you make saved me several mornings.
Yes, of course I get it. Coffee is my drug. So anyway, well, I appreciate. We just got a compliment that we blend you blend the best wines around, better than Cali wines. Well, I thank you for the compliment. I will take that any day of the week. One of the things I want to get back to, Rebecca, now that you've been tasting the wine, you're a Cabernet Franc enthusiast.
Yes, I am.
And so you have a fair amount of Cab Franc. When you smell this, do you get any hints of what it is you like in the Cab Franc in this wine, even though there is none?
Absolutely. And when Joe mentioned, when he asked how much Cab Franc was in this, I 100% understood where he's coming from. That vegetal, that sort of bell pepper note is, for me, I get that right away on the nose, which is one of the things that I absolutely love about Cabernet Franc. And that vegetal flavor that you get with it, I just really, really love. And I think that it bodes well for the marrying of the flavors that happens with this wine as it's been able to sit. It's not one particular thing that stands out really brightly as opposed to everything else. I think that you can really pick a lot of things out that all really work well together as opposed to one thing that's just shouting at you.
Good. I do. The thing I'm going to attribute this to, and I know I'm going to embarrass Jet a little bit, and I hope I do since he's on here reading us, but the Cabernet, the Merlot, and the Malbec actually grow side by side in that vineyard. There's a vineyard break. What I'm saying, and Joe and I, we were just up there, Joe, but Jet, I know I'm going to get this wrong, but when I say north to south, I mean when we're driving down the rows, we start up with the Merlot, we cross a big vineyard break and we go into the cab or into the Malbec. So they're there, and they're separate blocks certainly, but they're there in that same soil, in that same and God love my wife. She was trying to give me the geology last night. We zoomed in on his property. She had the overlay of the geologic map for West Texas. And in true geologic style, she goes, "This isn't very interesting. There's just two different bands here." And I'm like, "No, this is interesting." But they have that same sandy loam that they're grown through. So it's uniformly even. So we get this incredible blend of flavors from the varietal, not just the soil types changes in the vineyard. It's the same. So we're able to really blend down on that. And that's why I got so excited about this. And those
and sorry, John, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please. I'm just blowing.
I know you're going to talk about this a little bit, but I mean that's a classic Bordeaux vineyard planting. You've got Cab Sauv, Merlot, Malbec. So I think it's a interesting blend.
It is, and one of the things. So we're getting some great feedback here. I'm sorry, I'm listening. I've got one of our Gary's, one of the guys that follows us. He goes, "I've not yet gotten permission to go into the cellar." Gary, come on, I'll just bring you down there. The barrel program that we used in 2014 too was very important. So we still had a fair amount of the A&K barrels that we were getting from Herman, Missouri, I believe. Higbee, sorry, thank you, Higbee, Missouri, I guess. But in 2014, we actually that was the first year we were buying Demptos American oak, and then we were buying more of the Allier forest designate, so a very tight grained French oak. And then I do believe in 14 we had a couple of trials with Nadalier as well as Demptos. So this wine saw a fair amount, the Merlot saw a fair amount of American oak, where the Cab and the Malbec saw a fair amount of new French oak. So we really increased the level of French oak on here, as well as keeping more American oak into this program through the Merlot side of life. So we see this really beautiful blend of what oak can do. And we actually kept this in barrel long enough. We were not taking it out too early. We're keeping it in there almost 2 full years before we blended and bottled this as a reserve. So it really shows a big difference too, what a good aging barrel program can do.
This is what we were trying to make. We have, as we've talked about before, we love the early silver oak cabs that were made in these oak barrels, and this is what we've been trying to make. It's just smooth, it's rich, the alcohol's evaporated a little bit. I think it's and I forgot we'd put it in those Higbee barrels.
Yeah, we did a little bit of the Higbee barrels there. So but they weren't the dominant amount. There was dominant the Higbee for neutral, but all the new oak was not the A&K. This was the first year that we did this. So it's 13.8 on the label on the alcohol. So it really is a well balanced wine too. I mean, we've made 14.5 down to 13.5 off of that same vineyard, but every year we maintain a balance depending on extraction and everything else, and every year does take a little bit different approach. But the one thing that I'm really kind of starting to dive into because of Jet is the consistency in weather formatting every year. Do they get a consistent amount of rain at any particular time? I know West Texas weather, and everybody's going to give me a ration of crap for it, but there is a set pattern that you can follow over a 5 and 10 year period. So what is that? And Jet really is the master of tracking all of these little markers. So Rebecca, what other wines, if and when we get back to the cellar, what is it that you'd go through, and how do we choose those cellar wines to present to a cellar tasting?
So, well, part of it is I have to taste the wine ahead of time just to make sure that it's aged properly. And it's what I do. I take one for the team by doing that.
Thank you, Rebecca. We appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thanks. It's the hard part of my job. No, right. But we try and change it up every now and again. So if we do a vertical, for a couple months. Then we try and do one that is just all from the same vintage year for the next couple months. And so when we're doing that, what we're really looking at are wines that are going to not only complement each other, but that when you're tasting them one after the other, really kind of build up to something and kind of show that diversity through the vintage years or through the varietals. And so there is a certain amount of, okay, does that work well with this other wine? There are a lot of people don't actually realize, there's a reason that wines are listed in a certain order on your tasting menus and tasting rooms. And it's because if you're doing it right, those wines should build toward the next wine, and it should really set your palate up to be able to appreciate and kind of set your palate to where it's going to accentuate those notes and flavors that you really want the different wines to express. So there is actually a lot that goes into picking those.
Yeah, and it's basically what we did. That's why we decided to do these verticals this week and then in 2 weeks from now. And as a segue there, if you're enjoying this broadcast, please share it on Facebook, everybody. It helps us. I wanted to touch real briefly before we go into the standard food pairing thing. Start thinking about food, Rebecca and Joe. And I want some unique foods. But I wanted to remind everybody that next week is a wonderful tasting week for us. We're going to do the Saignée on Monday. That's our dry mid-palate rosé. Then Wednesday, we're doing the Yanita blend wine. It was our co-project with Francis Ford Coppola Winery in California. Corey Beck, their CEO of and head of wine making, is going to be on with us. And again, I need to remind people to go ahead and tease him. He is from California, just like myself. I just don't want to be the only one teased for it. And then Friday, we're doing the 2016 Atuno, which is one of our wine club selections. So next week's going to be fun. The following week, we're doing the Canada vertical, just like we did the Wilmeth Vineyard vertical, the Canada family vertical. And that'll be the 12, 14, and 15 Canadas that we'll be doing a week of Father's Day. Also, for that Father's Day pack up for Dad, we got a special box. Go online, look at it. It's got a ball cap, it's got a mug, it's got a grilling rub, it's got some really wonderful soap, so Dad can have some cosmetics too. That's guaranteed. No dad's gonna be like, what do you mean cosmetics? But my favorite, and I don't have it around, Chris gave me one. It's a piece of barrel stave with a bottle opener. I'm gonna put it in the tiki bar by the pool so you can snap your bottles open. So that'll be a fun thing to do. But next week on Wednesday, for sure, please join us on that one. So comes to the food section, guys. I've given you a few seconds. What are you going to think? I want to start off with Joe. So okay. Joe, food would you pair with the 2014 Wilmeth?
So I could be really boring and say the T word, tenderloin, but I'm not. So I'm gonna brag about our chef Michael Lockhart. Michael Lockhart makes the world's most incredible shepherd's pie. Just an absolutely wonderful sauce that we have had. We've had this a couple times with. We've actually paired it with an older Bordeaux and an older California, and I think this wine would be a great match for that.
Oh, I agree. I think you're absolutely right. The other thing Chef Michael does is he makes this gremolata sauce, and I swear he puts crack cocaine in it because it's so addictive. Just that fresh citrusy stuff that you just zap with a little bit of pork or fish or whatever. By the spoonful if you want. He's really nice. The thing that he does very well, and I'm really looking forward to cold weather again, or some of his soups are just really fantastic. So, Rebecca, what food would you pair with this?
So, ever since we mentioned morel hunting season, I want mushrooms and blue cheese crumbles over a sirloin with this is what I would like.
Okay. So just real basic.
Mushrooms and blue cheese.
And blue cheese, funny you should say that. And I'm going to go out on a line here because one of my favorite dishes I get a yen for are roasted Brussels sprouts, but I like to roast them until they're almost black on the edges, and throw in a handful of Texas pecans on top. The last 2 or 3 minutes it's in the oven. So they just start to toast. And when it comes out, crumble some really good blue cheese, like a Maytag blue from this little state of Iowa. You should see it. It's a really tiny state too. I looked on the map. It's like this big. There's a lady up there.
My whole family.
Might be able to
The
send it to you.
competition is my family.
But Maytag blue on top of that, it does really well with this because of that blue cheese. Those it just and the vegetal for the Brussels sprout, it goes really well with Cabernet. It's just amazing. But yeah, so it's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so we've got the food pairings, got all of that. We went through the wines. What am I forgetting?
Well, has it changed from when you first started the tasting to now, John?
It
Where,
has.
are you getting some additional things coming out? What are you getting?
So one real quick wrap up before we sign off on this. So I want everybody to swirl, sniff, and taste.
So I actually have a question for you, John. How does this compare to you to the two other Wilmeths that we've had this week?
Well, let me tell you, of the two Wilmeths that we had this week, the one that's going to age as well as this one is the 2016. The 2015 is good. It's very good, but it is not as tannic forward as these two. So it will age for another 5-10 years, not a problem. But I'm betting on this, and I've got a little bit in my cellar. I'm betting on this for the long haul. So I'm pretty sure that this one's going to show very beautifully. It's hard to describe. It will not taste the same 10 years from now as it does now, but I love an incredibly mature Bordeaux wine. I love mature Bordeaux's. The French were so spot on, and please don't tell anybody from France that I said this, but when they said we make wine for our grandchildren, and they have that philosophy of we're making it for the long haul. But there is something that when they started putting these wines together, they were right on the money. That's why Cabernet is king sometimes. You know, my only other favorite varietal outside of that would be Grenache. I mean, I love a lot of varietals, but this for its ageability. So I think this and the 2016 are pretty similar. The 2015 is the 2015 and the 2012 are very similar in as far as that goes. So it's kind of interesting. It'll be nice next year to be able to do a 7 vertical flight. It'll be kind of fun to see that. But I think the 2016 is probably my favorite outside of this one. How about you? What do you think? What are you getting between the three?
I agree. I decanted the 2014 for about an hour and a half before we started, and it's just, I feel like I've gone into my father's wine cellar. I sound like a broken record, but I feel like I pulled out a wine, and you're right, a older Bordeaux, and I feel like it's great. The fruit is beautiful, and in 10 years, gosh, it's going to be, it's going to have the full classic cigar box and cedar and forest floor that you get with those older cabs.
Yeah. Last time I was in your dad's wine cellar, he had 2 security guards pat me down before I could.
Were their names Will and Joe?
Yeah. That was me.
Right. So, Rebecca, what do you think of the 3 wines this week? You've tried them all.
I have. I really personally like the 14 the best. I just really like the good age on this wine. I think the 16 is probably second for me and the 15 probably third, and they're all fantastic. And I have consumed copious amounts of all 3, but I definitely like the 14 for me. And I also think that as I've let this decant and as I've gotten some more air into this, I'm definitely starting to get more of that cherry that you were mentioning earlier, and the dark currants. Those are definitely coming through the longer it's allowed to kind of open up. Yeah. And I really, really like those.
And I must say, I'm using the 33-ounce bowl glass too. So I really like that. So I just got a question real quick. We haven't had too many questions tonight, but one of them that I do want to answer before we get going. Somebody asked about, they have a needle in the cork aerator, where you put the needle in and, it also pushes the cork up. What do you think of that? I think it's a fine gizmo, but you know what? At home, I use an old-fashioned corkscrew. I have one that I found that I really love from back in 2003. It's got a wide handle that I can just screw down in there and pull up. You can use all of that, but really a good, simple decanter, you don't need to worry about aerating.
And I think, John, I was just going to say too, that this is the very basic Riedel decanter that we sell, and it's perfect.
It is, and and I love the ship's decanter because I have my eye on this Waterford ship's decanter. It's only about $35,000, so someday. But yeah, I just decanting the wine itself. If you don't have a decanter and you have a water pitcher, it works. It really does. It's not the best, but it does work. Just decant, about an hour before service on this vintage or older. And I think you'll be very, very happy with that on there. Okay, guys. So we got our food. We covered everything. And we've recapped the vertical tasting. I just want to tell everybody at home, thank you for joining us for another week.
Yes.
We look forward to next week. Eventually, we will reopen, I promise. Everybody, we want our friends and supporters to come back. But more importantly, we want you all to be safe. Have a great weekend. So cheers, good wine, and great health to everybody. Have a safe and happy weekend.
Happy weekend.